I see mostly everybody who came into the continent of Africa came to take and never to come to bring and help. Mostly everyone that came there as colonizers, be it the Arabs, Europeans, or the Asians, whoever came there, they came to take something from. I remember listening to the late Dr. Yusuf bin Yakana in at a lecture back in 1989 at Texas Southern University. He made the comment that prior to the 1960s, Africa fed the planet.
So if we have been cultivating this for since the 5000 BCE, we cannot say this is new to us. Nigeria, for example, is the largest producer of cassava in the entire world. The land is fertile. Yam, plantain, rice, cocoyam. There are a lot of crops that are just naturally doing well in Africa that we shouldn't go hungry. Thank you so much, brother, for being here. I'm so happy to have you here and the opportunity to be able to learn about an important conversation that is really very important for us, and it should be important for us as African and people of African descent in learning about the origin of agriculture. Because there is a professor friend of mine, is in the UK. He would say, he's an expert on agriculture. He would say that agriculture is the root of everything that we have in the world. Because you're going to talk about food, talk about medicine, talk about the clothes that you wear. All of them are coming from agriculture. And hardly have we ever talked about the origin. So having you here to talk about this with us, I am really, really so honored. So thank you so much. Why don't we just get started? Of course, you have the time to talk about yourself.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
All
It's an
right.
honor and a privilege for having the opportunity to deal with this subject matter, and I'm truly grateful for it because it's a needed topic dealing with the African origin of agriculture. It'll be presented to you by Imhotep Memory Consultancy LLC. Well, hello. I'm Negus Rudison Imhotep, PhD. I'm the CEO of Imhotep Memory Consultancy, LLC. I'm the CEO and the cultural memory specialist there at this organization. Here we go on the origins of agriculture. The origins of agriculture came from Africa, the Americas, and Eurasia. With a brief survey of the developments and documents around the world, we have a few centers where we see that the origin and the founding of crops and the domestication of animals emerged. And there were additional non-centers were identified by examining the evidence of plant uh, exploitation and eventual cultivation practices by the late and early periods of where foliage in regions of different portions of the world gave us researchers sufficient details together with the nature of the habitation sites. Uh, One can trace the common process of the traditions of hunting and gathering to farmers and community, and they continue to exploit the supplemental wild resources. So, in other words, in layman terms, basically, agriculture started in those areas of the world, Africa, a, Eurasia, and the Americas. And by looking at a bunch of this old evidence, we can see how early humans transitioned from hunting and gathering to farming. They started using plants and animals for food and continue using wild resources. And there was also the domestication of particular grains. We can go to the next slide, please. Artechi, Volata, region of Mauritania. Okay, a lot of people have no insight or very little insight on this particular topic. You hit the video, please.
Settlements may have been there since 4500 to 2300 BC. Archaeologists believe that this period was when people from this region shifted from a hunter-gatherer society to an agricultural society. During this time, the Sahara was fertile and had lush forests, making agriculture possible. Proof of an agricultural society was discovered by Patrick Munson as he found grain on ancient pottery shards and evidence of millet farming. Archaeologists dated millet farming in the Dar Tikrit site at around 1900 to 1700 BC, which is around the same time as the birth of agriculture. However, there wasn't alone, as neighboring regions in the Sahara was farming millet at around 2500 to 2000 BC. Some archaeologists believe that the people of Dar Tikrit are the ancestors of the Soninke people, who are the ancestors of the people of the Kingdom of Ghana. For more positive African history, check out my blog.
That was a short synopsis of what Dark Techi was about. Present-day Mauritania, well, it just stated that people were raised livestock and were fishers and hunters, and they gathered wild grains like millet. Uh, this region saw a shift in the hunting lifestyle to a pastoral one due to the climate change, and many pastoralists settled there, especially during the rainy season, because the climate provided enough food for livestock. This particular site is one a lot of historians are overlook about that particular region of West Africa, because the more emphasis is placed on ancient Kemet because of the grandeur of the civilization that was there. But yet we see that Darth Techi had been around for quite some time before uh, the birth of before the Christian era, and and this is one spot where you still see artifacts or ancient um, buildings that are still there at this particular site in Dark Techi. We want to move to the next.
Settlements may have been there.
The next slide, please. Okay, we're looking at the early Holocene global warming triggered profound environmental change that offered added resources to cohort and substance opportunities of post Paleolithic uh, hunter gatherers, plants and animals and domestic, resulting in from a change because agriculture uh, society, or not society, the world was changing. There's an early uh, evolution of plants and animals, and plants were so imperative, so important for life, for food, for air, because of the action of photosynthesis. We need the plants. Uh, like I said, different hypotheses have been formulated to understand the force and driving with the shifts and the mechanism sustained and to sustain this particular type of functioning on this planet through this process. We're going to go to the next slide, please. We see here the prime movers of the in these reviewed models include climate change, population growth, exchange dynamics, uh, fasting, feasting, or religion. We uh, we need to take a clear shot at staying focused on the genesis of the African agro system from a micro evolutionary perspective. Uh, the origin of man was mankind from the monolithic monogenetic, excuse me, uh, observation of mankind. Man first started on the continent of Africa. And in that place, that's where man evolved and grew. And from that particular time, they stayed there on the continent of Africa until Homo sapien uh, stood up erectly and cultivated this land and did these things. Then they migrated and circumnavigated the planet. So the Neolithic people were, at one time, everybody on the planet was brown or black because of the origins of mankind. And food and agriculture started right there in the heart of the continent of Africa. Uh, um, Dealing with the derived African agro systems, there's the genesis and diverse chronology and long-term evolution are outlined in the discussion. So we look at the domestication of pearl millet as well as its expansion in the continent are featured in a case study highlighting the core existing evolutionary synthesis assumptions that are directly causality, targets of solutions and modes of inheritance and pace of evolution operates in a micro as well as a macro level. So here we are, okra, my heart is okra. I am an okra fiend.
Good evening. I want to answer or I want to respond to a question: how to resuscitate or revive your farm when it is almost fading out. Now, what you need to do is weed the farm, get rid of pests in particular. Make sure you get rid of pests and let the place be clear. Make sure also you wet the farm, more especially when it's dry season. And when it is wet season and probably there's a delay in the rain, make sure you wet it. Now you can see this farm. You see that after doing that, the farm is coming back to life. You can see flower. Now these flowers will just be open for today. At the end of the day, the flower will fall off and your okra will start growing. As in the fruit will start growing. Now you can see, if you check the farm, you see there's flower all over from here down to the other side of the farm. You will see flower all over. Now this okra, we have been harvesting it, and this should be the 10th or 11th week that we've been harvesting it. And you can agree with me that from the flowers you see on the farm is still looking promising. And so this is to confirm to you that okra will produce for about 8 to 13 or even 15 weeks, depending on your management. And so you can see flowers all over. In fact, it's looking beautiful. You can see, young or small buds of the okra growing, which this flower you see, the next 4 to 5 days, the fruit there will be ready, ripe for harvest. And you harvest it when the fruit is still tender, so ready for consumption. But once you allow it to stay too long, it will now become hardened, which will not be convenient for cooking. And when that happens, it drops the value. Now, you will not be able to make good sales because consumers will not want to go for a hard
Okra. I love okra. Okra is a staple. Okra is a crop that you can find in West Africa, East Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa. Uh, uh, when you look at the traditional knowledge and the nutritional value and the physical traits, there are two particular variations of okra. It's called Kintesi and Sharma. Researchers have questionnaires and checklists on labs analysis to gather information about okra. But most important to me about okra is that a lot of people here in the Western Hemisphere are not aware that okra was not here in the Western Hemisphere until it was transported through people from Africa who brought it here. Uh, it was stated that even through the transatlantic human cargo trade, I don't call my ancestors slaves, but through that trade, people or women quite often took the seed of this plant and braided it in their hairs for their venture when they were coming here to the Western Hemisphere. So I always remember okra. And one thing about okra, my great grandmother, who was a sharecropper from Utah, Alabama, she would, I remember on one occasion she had made some okra, what they call it succotash. You have okra and maize and also with tomatoes. And I remember as a child, my great grandmother uh, broke up some cornbread, and she had some okra, and she grabbed that cornbread and picked the okra up with her hand, and she told me to come here. I was just a child, and I came to her, and she said, "Now open your mouth." And I opened my mouth, and she put the okra with the cornbread mix in my mouth, and I chewed it, and she said, "How did that taste?" And I said, "It was delicious." She said, "I'm using my hands because that's the way my mother taught me to eat. She was from Africa." And I always, to this day, I am a okra fiend. So I can't help it. I had to stay there for okra for a little bit because I love it so much. We can go ahead and move on to our next slide. We're talking about cotton. Cotton was king. This phrase was used in the South during the American Civil War, and cotton really uh, influenced the whole present day global market from a particular period. Looking at the textile industry, uh, like I said here, the South exported around 90% of Britain's textile industry shortly before the Civil War after the introduction of the cotton gin. And during this, we see America uh, gain power economically. Go ahead.
The Cotton Kingdom was a kind of a plantation complex that emerged in the Deep South beginning in about 1820, really after the War of 1812. And it resulted from the removal of the Native Americans of the Southeast, of the Creek, of the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, the Cherokee, and the Seminole. And that removal, that imperial removal, produced hundreds of millions of acres for white settlement. And so white migrants from the eastern seaboard, from places like Virginia and Maryland, moved there. And they moved with them 1 million enslaved people. And those enslaved people, by and large, after a generation in which they cut down all the trees and turned the forests into fields, cultivated cotton. And cotton during that period was the greatest single export of the United States. It accounted for about 2/3 of the exports from the United States. And so that's the cotton that is processed in mills in Rhode Island, in Massachusetts, in Manchester. And it's really the basis of the Atlantic economy of the 19th century. So if you think about the role that people have said oil plays in the world today, cotton is the fundamental raw material of 19th century capitalism.
Cotton was king. Cotton still is king. Cotton was crucial for the Benin economy, making up a large part of the exports and tax revenue. It supported 1/3 of the population and generates many jobs in the industrial sector. Cotton also boosts other sectors like transportation and construction, and it plays a role in rural development. So we need cotton for clothing, cotton for all different uh, needs and usages with cotton. We can go to the next slide. Peanuts, ground nuts, one of my favorite too. Peanut is also known as a ground nut, and gobblers and toxicom toxicology, excuse me. Uh, my verbiage is kind of shaky today, but looking at peanuts, ground nuts, it's a very important food group. Ground nuts are important food and nutrition and income. However, because of the aflatoxins that are and the allergens, they have a short lifespan on market shelves. And dealing with their competitiveness, consumers and markets need solutions to improve groundnut profitability. So groundnuts is a, a good food. Uh, I love the oil that you can get from the groundnuts as well is needed. So we're going to go ahead on this slide here about it. Groundnuts is also classified both as a grain and a legume, and because of its high oil content, it's the oil crop in the world. Annual production of shelled peanuts was 42 million tons in 2014, typically on the crop plant. Peanut pods develop underground rather than above. So that's why they use the term hypogenia, which is meaning that it was grown underground. Um, and peanuts are so important, being a native of this country, born here in this country, but in the state of Iowa, one of the top agricultures or botanists of all times here in this nation was named Dr. George Washington Carver. He was he was a botanist. He was the first black man to graduate from college here in the state of Iowa at Simpson College. He also attained his master's and his terminal degree at Iowa State University. And something about Dr. Carver, I remember reading uh, something in his biography in regards to Dr. Carver when he was at Tuskegee University, when Booker T. Washington started that university uh, in the in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And Dr. Carver uh, was a genius. Basically, he was a multi-genius. And Carver, when he was at Tuskegee, was planting uh, all different types of crops to see what was sustainable there in Alabama. And a bunch of his colleagues, academic colleagues, thought he was losing his mind at one moment because they saw him laying on the ground and talking to the ground. Some of his colleagues thought that he was mentally losing it, like he lost his mind. And when they stopped him, asked him, "Why were you talking to the ground?" He said, "I was talking to the peanuts. I was talking to yams, and they were talking back to me." And everybody thought he lost his mind, but afterwards, he came up with numerous inventions for the peanut. He created peanut butter. Uh, they had he came up with, I think, over numerous usages for the peanut as well as the sweet potato. And he was a black man that was born here in the Western Hemisphere, but yet he had that African genius in him and knew how to connect with God and nature. So it, he had a divine insight to what was going on. Also read in his biography, he stated that he was praying one night to God and he said, "God, I need you to help me. I want to find the answer to the problems of this world." And he said, God spoke back to him and said, your mind is too small for such a big task. So he said, well, God, tell me something about these peanuts. And that's when it happened. There's also classified peanuts as a green linule. And because it is high oil content, we see that around the world, there's 42 million tons of peanuts that was produced over 10 years ago in 2014. And I love peanuts. Some people are allergic, but yet it's a staple. It's a cash product. It's a cash crop that can be utilized. We need to find ways to preserve the shelf time on peanuts because it would be a great product to bring forth and sell and back and forth from the continent of Africa here and back here in the Western world, on the western portion of the world. So that's something that agriculturalists here in the U.S. and elsewhere in the African diaspora need to really focus on means of obtaining and preserving the shelf time on this particular product so we can move it around the world. We'll go to the next slide, please. Cassava. Oh my goodness, I love cassava. Cassava is crucial for the food security of millions of people in sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, cassava is absolutely an essential food product that's needed in sub-Saharan Africa. There's growing focus on the social capital to explain household food security, but more information is needed. Food security is declining because of traditional resources haven't fully addressed the issue. I think from what I have heard is that major crops or cash crops are really focused to move off the continent of Africa into other portions around the world where we need to be more concerned also about feeding the people on the continent of Africa, because there's a lot of people who are not malnutrition, but under nutrients, and cassava is extremely important. So I was looking at that because I know without cassava, sometimes I like yam fufu, but cassava is good too. I love both of those products because it's a staple. It makes you strong every time I eat some good, strong food like that. So we can go to the video.
Now, cassava feeds millions of people across Africa. But lack of finances, poor planning and marketing of the crop partly explain why farmers in Cameroon hardly view it as a lucrative crop. But one agricultural production agency is now working with small-scale farmers in the country to train and help them access sustainable markets for the crop. Maria Galang with the details.
These farmers in Buea, southwestern Cameroon, have been harvesting cassava all their lives. But this season is different. They're anticipating better returns. The farmers are part of a program run by AgroHub, an agricultural marketing agency that is working to help communities earn higher profits by linking growers to markets and processing food crops like cassava into value-added goods.
We had very many difficulties because from farm when you come back to go and grind, you walk miles. But now that we have profit this machine, we grind only a stone throw and at least we feel better.
We decided to transform cassava from a food crop into a commodity, and now it is becoming a commodity because the farmers have seen the various ways they can transform cassava into, and it can give them much more money than any other crop they were into before.
This is one of the derivative flours from the crop, gari. It's made from cassava pulp by fermenting it for about 5 days and later roasting it in large pans to dry. The gari is sold in local markets and to buyers who come from neighboring countries like Nigeria and Gabon. 37% of Africa's dietary energy comes from cassava, and per capita consumption on the continent is close to 80 kilograms per year. But the sector is still underdeveloped.
The government don't support the agriculture. They don't even give subvention to farmers enough for them to be able to compete. So people see agriculture now in Cameroon as a thing for the poor.
Economists say programs finding ways to create added value to crops grown primarily for household consumption could be revolutionary.
With yams, yams are essential. The intensification of staple food crops such as yams while sustaining the environment is an imperative in providing food for an expected 9.6 billion global population by 2050. Ooh. In West Africa, amidst the threat imposed of climate change on food security, yam products, yam production is associated with the deforestation and large land degeneration. Integrated soil fertility management and improving staking options for intensifying and sustainable yam production on continuous crop fields hold the key to addressing this challenge. Recent data evaluate that the last decade yam production trends in West Africa, and the three leading yam producing countries were Nigeria, Ghana, and Cote d'Ivoire. And there had been a reduction in the growth of yams because of deforestation and soil issues. So we need to look back into what's going on in the earth, and we'll look at this particular.
Ground into flour, boiled or fried. Yams provide sustenance and livelihoods across West Africa. But growing conditions across the yam belt, from Guinea to Cameroon, are deteriorating, just as prices of other staples soar. Nigerian market vendor Adewale Elekun sells yams. He says life for farmers in Nigeria is getting harder.
Before, the way they farmed was different, but the soil is bad now. The soil was good and the land was well graded in the past, so when farmers planted yam, the yam would germinate quickly. But today the quality of the soil has deteriorated, so pesticides that we used to kill all fungus now affect the yam planting.
The need to boost locally grown crops has become more acute due to global food price rises. That's where scientists like molecular geneticist Ranjana Bhattacharjee come in. She is working at Ibadan's International Institute of Tropical Agriculture to complete whole genome sequencing of around 1,000 yam samples. She hopes that this will ensure that future crops are more adaptable to a changing climate.
We are going to try to, take those genes and transfer, and then the quality will improve, the consumer preferences will improve, and also the yield of that crop will improve. So that will then ultimately lead to food security, not only in Nigeria, but also in West Africa where yam is being grown.
64th celebration of independence for the nation of Nigeria, and the Iowa Nigerian Association asked me to come in and be a keynote speaker. And at the event, my wife was born here in the U.S. as well, and she had never had pounded yam. But she got hold to that pounded yam and she said, "Honey, what is this?" I said, "It is good, isn't it?" And she said, "Yes, I want some more." I said, "Well, all you have to do is go back. I'll go get you something up there at the table where they were serving." And I looked at yams because here in the U.S., a lot of people in the U.S. Eat sweet potato, and they think that it's a yam, and it's not. It's a sweet potato. But a yam is totally different product. And looking at the process, especially looking at Iguzi, oh my God. And all that good food like that, we were having such a great time at this event. We need more African restaurants and here in the city of Des Moines and elsewhere around the world. So yams is one of my favorite. We could go to the next slide. Okay, well, we're looking at the nutritional density of the crops to make it a viable food crop. Uh, and it is important to use to look at what's going on because there's some issues about deforestation because of what's going on with global warming and immune gases in the air. But we need to, as people from the continent of Africa and people around the world, scientists need to come together and focus on why there are reductions in food products because of issues like what's going on in the environment. Because we need to stay focused on what we should really do about maintaining and feeding a gigantic continent like Africa to have the food supplies for people there as well as for folks around the world. Okay, we're looking at African Orphan Crop Consortium. I found out about this about 5 years ago, and they're looking at generating orphan crops or seeing if there's a way to domesticate particular crops so that we can maintain and create another food, another edible form of vegetation that will sustain the human functioning and helps our body. So we're going to go on there and look at what's going that African Orphan Crop Consortium, they help local scientists develop better crop varieties to improve health and nutrition in sub-Saharan Africa. These scientists are trained and looking at many new right, and bring forth some form of nutrients to millions of people. So thumbs up to the African Orphan Crop Consortium. I had the opportunity to be at this event, and it was in 2017, the World Food Prize. Dr. Adenise of Nigeria received the award that night, and it was a beautiful event. And many people in Africa go hungry every day, and better nutrition is essential for improving health, education, and prosperity. And it's crucial to invest in sustainable and healthy diets to ensure food security for all people. Now, almost a quarter of a billion men, women, and children across the continent go on stomach from dawn to dusk. According to a 2019 study by the African Union, 50 children under the age of 5 are chronically undernourished, and 13 million are at risk of starvation. That was back in 2019. I'm inclined to believe the states might be higher. For too long, African countries have failed to make the investments necessary to provide sustainable food diets for their citizens. We cannot go on and continue this way. Better nutrition for African countries is foundational to advance health and well-being and educational attainment and prosperity and equity. It's time to deliver food security at a scale to nourish, at the highest scale possible, to nourish people on the African continent as well as people abroad. Agriculture in Africa is.
Since the start of the new millennium, average economic growth in sub-Saharan Africa has frequently outpaced the rest of the world. According to the International Monetary Fund, total GDP output for the region was estimated at $2.1 trillion in 2022, with this forecast to rise to $2.9 trillion by 2026. At the same time, the region's population is expected to more than double over the next 30 years, presenting significant challenges, not least of which will be food security. The UN Food and Agricultural Organization estimates that globally we'll need to produce 60% more food by 2050 to feed the world's population. Over 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land lies in sub-Saharan.
We need. Looking at the influx and the population boom on the continent of Africa and the land that is available for agriculture, it would be a great means to help employment on the continent of Africa with people, young people who are willing to go to work and till the soil and plant the products, because there's a need globally to use this arable land in the best way possible. We need to find the best practices to approach this particular issue to maintain food security or to increase food security here on this planet. Looking at what's going on with on the continent of Africa, there's a need here also for Africans of the diaspora to connect with Africans on the continent and to create positive, secure collaborations where we could find or use private investors here in the U.S. or elsewhere in the African diaspora to invest back on the continent of Africa and to maintain and transfer monies around the globe. We could do it together. It's a need for us to come together and use the true essence of the word Ubuntu, that we could come together and create ideals and use our money and ideals to help the nutrition, to help bring for sustainable nutrition for people on the continent of Africa and people elsewhere on this planet. And Africa is the key.
I really appreciate the presentation. It's full of value. It's full of incredible value. In fact, I have the sensation that we'll come back to some other part of the conversation, because there are a lot to talk about, particularly going more in detail in some of these crops that were made mention of, because some of them are actually the brain behind the survival of the people, not only in Africa but for the rest of the world. You talk of wheat, for example. You see, when the war in Ukraine broke out, it's like the entire world was shocked because there was short of grain coming to the market. So talking of maize and the rest of it. But Africa can actually play a big role in that. In fact, I sort of say quite often that Africa is not the land where we should ship food to. It's a land where we should ship food out from because it's a food basket of the world. We have a lot of opportunity and we have been domesticating some of these crops for several thousands of years. You see, when you were talking, I went to research cotton, for example, and what I found just now as you were talking, let me see if I can share with you, is that cotton have been used for, it's around 5,000 BCE in Eastern Sudan. So if we have been cultivating this for since the 5,000 BCE, we cannot say this is new to us. Nigeria, for example, is the largest producer of cassava in the entire world. The land is fertile. Yam, plantain, rice, cocoyam. There are a lot of crops that are just naturally doing well in Africa that we shouldn't go hungry. We shouldn't go hungry at all. So I don't know if you want to speak more on the possibility, because I think the second part of the title is feeding the population.
In the world.
Yeah. So I want you to
Feeding the
speak
world.
more on that, looking at Africa agricultural potential.
Well, the thing is that I remember listening to the late Dr. Yusuf bin Yakana at a lecture back in 1989 at Texas Southern University. He made the comment that prior to the 1960s, Africa fed the planet. After 1960, Africa became a continent that had to import food. And why was 1960 so important? It was a year of flag independence for a lot of nations in Africa, where some of the colonializers left the continent, but yet they had, like I said, nations had flag independence, but they were still facing neo-colonialism. And like you said, wheat is a particular product that everybody around the world utilizes. But you brought up the issue with Ukraine and what's going on with the war there, because they can't till the fields or work the fields while people are at war. You know, you're not thinking about farming when somebody's dropping bombs and shooting. So it made a major deficiency in the production of that particular food group, and caused issues like what's going on in Sudan right now, because food is not getting to Sudan. Sudan's, like you said, looking for somebody to import food to Africa when Africa was known as the continent that exported food groups to everybody on the planet. And it's because of what happened through colonialism and basically to maintain the needs of the global market in certain areas, because no one really cares about Africa. As the word I see, mostly everybody who came into the continent of Africa came to take and never to come to bring and help. Mostly everyone that came there as colonializers, be it the Arabs, Europeans, or the Asians, whoever came there, they came to take something from the continent instead of bringing something to the continent to help those that are there. And the late Dr. Walter Rodney, in his book, How the Europeans Underdeveloped Africa, gives us a clear and concise illustration of what's going on to this day on the continent and the effects of what has happened through colonialism. So it's time for leaders on the continent to get their heads on straight and look at what's going on and use those who are educated about not just people with degrees, but those who are educated on understanding what really needs to be done will have to come together and find a way uh, to collaborate with one another on the goal of maintaining this food security. So,
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Now, in terms of investment, because in the Classes Academy, we are very heavy on trying to promote the idea of people of African descent or people of African in the diaspora investing in Africa, not on the basis of going to help, but on the basis of doing business, going there to make money. But your money should help alleviate or it should help alleviate the poverty in the land. We're not
yes,
saying come and bring your money and dash it to the people. No, bring your money, invest, you make more money. But because you are doing business there, it will also trickle down to the people. You create job opportunity for the local people. So what chances do you see there of maybe US businesses going to invest in Africa? Instead of US aid sending food to Africa, we could create the job, the food in Africa, because research have shown, studies have shown that we have been producing this food for very many years. The food that the continent need to survive is produced right in Africa. It can be produced right in Africa. We don't need food aid. We need businesses and business collaboration so that a farmer can go to the farm. The instrument that is needed, the equipment that is needed to cultivate can be provided. What do you say around that line?
I say it's absolutely essential that we come to realize that we need to do that with one another. As a matter of fact, I'm working with a client right now from Congo who looking at agriculture in the Congo, as well as I talked to another client that's in Tanzania, and they're looking for private investors or angel capitalists to come in and invest not great sums of money, but some sums of money that could help generate a particular group where they could develop and do create more jobs for the people in their community and create uh, uh, food security, as well as having those resources reciprocate between the people on the continent of Africa and members of the African diaspora, wherever they are. It's absolutely essential that we make steps in that direction, because looking here in the United States, for instance, amongst the people of African descent, uh, we have probably the 12th largest economy on the planet among African Americans. Yet African Americans are a consumer class that consume everything, but they don't produce anything. It's high time for people to use their income and use their income and diversify it to create a residual income, if put it that way. If you would invest in on the continent, you could help with the development of communities by generating funding to do the things that people want or need there on the continent of Africa. If we need uh, better water systems, if you need to generate and build new schools, or whatever. Uh, I'm not going to go to Africa and tell people what they need. I'm saying let's bring it there. They know what you already know what you need. So if we can put our capital together and work and transfer funds back and forth with one another and look at how we could help communities obtain certain things that they need. If you can make enough money where you can create help the infrastructure and build new roads and build schools and build what new businesses and just change the whole infrastructure of the continent. in particular areas that are being invested in.
Thank you so much for that. Dr. Negus, tell me a bit about your interest in agriculture. For how long have you been interested or have been working on agriculture?
Since I was probably about 6 years old. And now I'm 64. My father, my dad, he was a businessman in Houston, Texas, and he had a furniture business, but he made enough money to where he diversified his income and purchased property and livestock. And we had vegetation on those properties, and we even had vegetation at home in our backyard. So everyone at that time here in the U.S. were more communal. We were more like our ancestors in Africa because we were all about community and working together. Because Miss Crabtree down the street, she might have had some collard greens, and my dad might have killed a cow, and if we needed some collard greens, we could go to Miss Crabtree, or Miss Crabtree needed some meat. My dad had meat because he killed a whole cow, and he would give food away to folks in the community, and we were all concerned, and everybody in the community looked out for all the children, and we were at that point of looking at like what Ubuntu is supposed to stand for. I am because you are, and we look out for one another. And it's time for members of the African diaspora to open up their eyes and look back to the place of our origin and do some things to improve the lives of those on the continent and to those that are abroad. I'll continue to beat that horn, pound that drum, because I also remember my mother, God bless her soul, she would always state that her father told her back in the 1930s that it was going to be a time where a bridge was going to be created from the continent of Africa to everywhere else where the descendants of Africans were, so we could reconnect and recommunicate. And I'm just elated that if that was a prophecy, it's being fulfilled right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We need to work more to make sure that that becomes a reality in our time, because with the power of internet, we don't have any reason not to communicate anymore, not to build bridge and do businesses among ourselves. That is why we have A-Classes Creative Studio. What it does basically is that we are trying to tap into businesses here in the West and make sure that the businesses are executed in Africa, particularly within the area of creative economy. So maybe somebody's looking for who to build your website, who to do your video editing, who to do your email marketing and all of that. Because these are things that you don't necessarily need to ship in material. You can work on it from anywhere in the world. So we have a young population in Africa. So why don't we leverage it? They are ready. They are armed with the internet. They are available. They are a labor force that can be employed. And we are saying, therefore, to our fellow brothers and sisters in the diaspora who own businesses, it's time to focus their attention on African creative mind. Let them be the one doing the job for us. Instead of shipping it to some other places, let us give them the job to do. Nobody's telling you, come and send them your money. Send them the opportunity, give them the opportunity to work for you in your business. Let's connect. Let's know each other. Let's learn to trust each other, that we can collaborate, we can work with ourselves. And we are hundreds of millions of people, particularly in the diaspora. If you add that to the population we have in Africa, we are a significant force in the world. So we need to collaborate. We absolutely need to collaborate. So how would you like to conclude this conversation?
I would like to say that this is absolutely essential for the Africans on the continent and those abroad to connect or reconnect and make moves that are necessary for the uplift and the building of the continent and for our people. In the words of the late Marcus Garvey, he stated, Africa is for Africans, those at home and those abroad. And we need to reconnect and make that happen.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Dr. Negus.
Opportunity. Thank you.